Meredith referenced this as well, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I think it's important to reflect that the sensory input that the brain receives, what are known as the feel-good chemicals, or the ones that help calm, versus cortisol and adrenaline that are, their purpose is for that running from the bear analogy as was referenced before. But this is what it looks like in school if we fail to take that trauma-informed approach. We know that through trauma there are changes to the brain. We know that that will then create a hypervigilant state. I'm on, ready to, at any moment, fight, flight, freeze if needed. Then we have some kind of distressful behavior. I will be going back and forth, sorry. Anyway, some distressful behavior, and then we're asking you to lower your voice. You need to go sit in your chair. You can't act like that. You cannot swear. So we have those non-compliant situation, which then of course leads to that escalation. And what do we do with the escalation? We consequence the behavior, and that reinforcement then through punishment with a lack of understanding about the neuroscience. So unfortunately, in our colonial institution called school, this can be the cycle. What I'd like to do, I am going to share a couple of videos with you because I do believe in the power of these stories, and I think that I couldn't say it any better myself. So I do want to share a resource with you from the United Kingdom that I think is excellent, that will talk about what happens with children and youth, that maladaptation, that social thinning that we see where they cannot navigate the world with peer relationships or with interactions with adults. So that ability to self-regulate in unfamiliar situations. And also, interestingly enough, someone who has that, what people might call that trauma brain, or running from the brain stem, picks up on fewer environmental cues before they make a decision about what this is about. And so sometimes kids, you look at them a certain way and their mind automatically goes to, you hate me, this place sucks. And we see peer conflict all the time because some students are really picking up on very little information before that fight, flight, freeze is kicking into gear for the survival brain. So let's take a look at this clip, and it is gonna work, I just know it.
Brain development is much more than a story about biology. From the earliest years, relationships with others play a key role in shaping how our brain grows and develops. Early relationships, where there is abuse and neglect, have a long-term impact on children. A brain that has adapted to survive in a threatening or unpredictable world may not work so well in an ordinary environment. This can create what is called latent vulnerability, where early abusive or neglectful experiences with carers put children at greater risk of experiencing mental health problems in the future. For these children, compared to their peers, common experiences like moving to a new school can feel more daunting and stressful. New faces can appear threatening, while positive social cues can be missed. It can be harder to negotiate new social situations and learn to trust new people.
Even fun experiences like joining a new sports team can be challenging. Too much focus on potential threat cues can mean missing out on positive social cues such as a playful nudge. Or it causes an overreaction, which leads to an increased risk of conflict and sometimes violence. These reactions can increase the likelihood of generating new stressful events. It's harder to deal with everyday challenges when you feel unconfident and anxious inside, and harder to build and maintain relationships. Over time, this can mean a child loses friends and the support of adults, and so misses out on opportunities to grow and develop. This social thinning can increase the risk of mental health problems in the future. Neuroscience research is beginning to shed new light on how vulnerability unfolds over a child's life. All children need care and stimulation from adults who value them and who show them attention and love. These experiences shape a child's brain development. When children face traumatic experiences like abuse and neglect, their brain adapts to help them cope. We know of changes in 3 different brain systems: the reward, memory, and threat systems. Experiences of domestic violence or physical abuse can lead to hypervigilance, where the brain reacts more to threat. This might help a child stay safe in an early adverse environment, but it can cause problems in more ordinary environments. Hypervigilance can best be understood as a pattern of adaptation rather than a sign of damage. Abuse and neglect can also mean a world where a child's basic needs for care and attention are not met. This can shape the brain's reward system, the part of the brain that helps us learn about positive aspects of our environment and motivates our behaviour. Over time, the brain's reward system can learn to respond differently to things like positive social cues. Neuroscience studies have also pointed to changes in the autobiographical memory system, our memory of everyday past experiences. Following trauma, negative memories appear to become more salient, which means they become more prominent than positive ones. And everyday memories can also become less detailed. This is a problem because we need to draw on past experiences to help us deal with new social situations. Neuroscience research is showing how childhood trauma can create latent vulnerability, increasing the risk of later mental health problems like anxiety and depression. This vulnerability is not just located in the child, but arises through their relationships. Helping children who have experienced trauma still requires ordinary boundaries and consequences, but it also requires us to step back and reflect and see behaviour that we find challenging in a different light. A child may simply be doing their best to survive now, with brain adaptations from the past. We know a child's brain has the capacity to continue to adapt. For this to happen, they need our help to build and maintain trusted relationships, manage everyday stresses, and prevent new ones from happening. We need to encourage them to try again and believe things can be different. This is far from an easy task and takes time. Science is helping reframe our understanding of childhood trauma. Seeing children's behaviour in a new light can mean we respond differently. But there is much still to learn. Working together, we can develop more effective approaches that promote resilience and recovery. We can help children build trusting relationships and create opportunities for their brains to adapt in new ways.
So as Meredith referenced earlier, one of the most powerful things we can do is be a caring, stable, predictable adult. And doing that in our day-to-day work in the school system can be incredibly powerful. I did indicate that I think that reference or resource rather is an excellent one. I will just maybe take a moment and let you know what's on your table and what's on the side table in case you're interested in additional resources. Our provincial organization of principals, OPC, did conduct some research which is referenced on your table, interviewing administrators and educators about how much they know about trauma-informed practice, how much they believe that trauma impacts the learning environment, and you can see that the statistics are staggering. So I did provide a copy for your perusal if you're interested. And then I did make copies of your research, Ellen, on the tables as well, and that's our local homegrown work with the turtles and getting trauma-informed information out in the community. I'll also make note that there are a couple of documentaries that we did multiple screenings of around the community, and I'm hoping that from this symposium there will be a resurgence of interest in doing more screenings. So all of the research that was referenced by Meredith can really be captured. That seminal work is captured in the document Resilience. And then Paper Tigers, those of you who have heard Rick Griffin or will hear hear him this evening. Some of the work in Walla Walla, Washington and area is sort of a school's journey along that way. So as we can see, we have a prime opportunity with children to impact that neuroplasticity and be able to create an environment where those cues are not perceived as a threat. But it's always possible over the lifespan, but we have this maximum zone of development in younger years, and that's why we really believe that whatever we choose to do as a community needs to be rooted in schools, because there is no one who will have more contact time with children than the educators in front of them, and we know that that's also the optimal window of hope. And so in the school setting, if we have this knowledge, our goal would be to be able to identify dysregulation, to use co-regulation skills that we all get better at over time, in order to, if the student is up here, Meredith referenced, the bigger they are, the smaller you get, the louder they are, the quieter you speak. Sometimes getting up there with them and saying, yes, this isn't fair. I understand you're angry. I don't blame you, and then bringing them down with you, with the goal, of course, to self-regulate. I wish, if you are familiar with IEPs in schools, IEPs are based on a student's learning needs. I wish we had IEPs for ACEs, because if you look at some of the accommodations that we should be putting in place for students who have been impacted by trauma, it would be things like preferential seating. So what does that look like for you? Do you want to be close to an exit so that if you're starting to lose it, we don't have a production in front of a classroom of students? We can, sort of maintain that level of respect for the student. I really believe there are lots of accommodations that we can put into a classroom setting, and we need to think of our behavior safety plans and our IEPs through that trauma lens. I have some little acronyms that help me in my daily work as a principal. And Rick certainly references some of these as well. All behavior is communication. You've just got to figure out what they're communicating. Sometimes they don't know what they're communicating. But having that curious stance, be curious, not furious. I will often say that with my vice principal colleagues or teaching staff. The I wonder question, let's pose the I wonder question. I wonder why they did that. Let's not talk about what they did and how awful it was and what we're going to do to consequence them. I wonder why they did that. So be curious and not furious. I will often use this phrase as well, hurt people hurt people. And again, that maladaptation, that fight, flight, freeze, if we can reframe what we're seeing, it helps us. And I would say it also diminishes our stress response. Because I feel better about understanding that behavior, I am not personalizing it nearly as much. I am not taking it home nearly as much, because I can sort of come to an understanding of what it is that I'm really seeing there. And we need to start where they're at and not expect you have to play school. And if you can't play school, then start where they're at and not leave them there, though, and understand their stories. As was referenced in the video, though, understanding their stories isn't a pity party. It doesn't mean they get away with everything that happens, but it means that we change our approach and we may change those next steps. So it's not excuse making. Sometimes educators will say, yeah, but look at what they're getting away with, and it's not really about that. And a couple of my favorites, when in doubt, think Q-tip, quit taking it personally, and WTF is not the WTF that's in your mind right now, it's what's the function? What's the function of this behavior for this kid right now? I am going to close, and I've got my 5-minute time there. I am going to close with another video. No Kleenex in the house, you might need some Kleenex, but this is a clip of the Compassion Project in California, based on the work of Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris in the prison system and helping inmates understand their own trauma.
tear-jerking a little bit, but this, to me, speaks to the moral imperative of why we need to do this work. So what you're going to see is the ACEs inventory being done with the inmates.
It's time now, everyone. We're going to do the Compassion Trauma Circle. Is everyone ready to face their past with compassion? Is that a yes? While you were growing up, during your first 18 years of life, if a parent or other adult in the household often or very often would swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, step inside the circle. If a parent or other adult in the household often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or threw something at you, step inside the circle. If a parent or other adult in the household often or very often ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured, step inside the circle. If you often felt that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, step inside the circle. If your family lived in extreme poverty, step inside the circle. Step inside the circle. Step inside the circle. Step inside the circle. So good. Good to see you. How are you? Amen. Oh, wow. Good to see you. Welcome. I was abused as a young girl. I was beaten by my mother. I was verbally abused by my mother. I was sexually abused by another man. My father was an alcoholic. My mother was a rageaholic. I've driven drunk. I've sold drugs. I was a juvenile delinquent. Probably my story is similar to most of your stories in here. I'm white and I'm female and nothing happened to me. So, I got a get out of jail free card. And so I'm here now because I see myself in every one of you.
I'm a traumatized child, raised by a traumatized child. My mother was traumatized as well as her parents.
Like he said, we wasn't born in the world of being evil people. My mother didn't want me. She hid her pregnancy. She tried to flush me down the toilet. But as I learned about these things, I always asked myself what was wrong with me.
When I come to the circle and I see everybody else and she's reading off the questions and people stepping in further, and I look at my childhood, I'm like, a lot of these people in this yard are just like me.
There was one step I should have taken that I didn't take, and I saw some of my brothers and my friends take that step, and I felt like such a coward. I wasn't brave enough to be there with them when they took that step. And every round after that, I took the most difficult step.
Our traumas kept us separated. We were all on the circumference, all standing apart. But once we began to acknowledge our traumas publicly, it brought us all closer together.
In prison, you're not supposed to show your weaknesses in prison, though. But to want to do that, to walk in that circle like that, and to take each step forward was a reminder to ourselves that we still have the humanity and we worthy to be loved, though. Most people on the outside don't understand that we want to change so we can re-enter society better than what we left it.
And I think one of the things that when you was yelling that no shame and you had us yelling it out, it was freeing us too. And it was a point to where when I was looking at that and we was all looking at it in a circle, you can hear that echo, no shame. And that was very powerful, especially coming from a little lady like you.
I'm 76 years old. I've seen a lot. I don't like talking. I like to meet people that understand what's happening without words. And you one of them. Today has been one of the best days I had in my whole entire life. I'm ready for it.
Your true spirits are not violent. Your true spirits are magnificent.
Hi, my name is Fritzi Horseman, founder of the Compassion Prison Project. Thank you so much for watching our promo for Step Inside the Circle. We're asking for donations so that we can continue our urgent and important work, educating the public about the devastating effects of childhood trauma and bringing this awareness to the men, women, and children living in prison. Our mission is to transform prisons into places that focus on education, mental health, and rehabilitation. Your donations will help us advocate for trauma-informed care, community support, and a shift in the paradigm in how we incarcerate, isolate, and dehumanize the most traumatized members of our society. Thank you again for watching.
No, I was not putting a plug in for donations to the Compassion Project, but there is no appetite in the United States to support this work, and so they are an enterprise trying to find ways to go into the prison system to do the work. So some of the things that we have happening, I'm wrapping my section up at this point. Obviously, we are in the midst of our Resilience Symposium right now. We are hoping, as a group of some agencies and organizations, to put together a proposal to the Community Foundation to tap into the Sisters of Providence funding to embed a community-based approach to trauma-informed practice. We would love to see that happen in the education sector and other areas, and so we'll be assembling once this symposium is over to look at what some of those next steps could be. And I will wrap up my section at this point, and I'm going to ask that Gary come up, Gary Castle come up. Yes, while we're transitioning here, feel free to ask any questions.